Russia claims that its missile strike on Ukraine was a warning to the West. But is the reality a lot less dramatic? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a really interesting story because it illustrates a key principle that Russia operates on and a key tactic of Russia's manipulation. So check it out. Russia, of course, you guys know, launched an ICBM-like missile, right? You might know that there's currently debate going on among experts about whether or not this actually was an ICBM. The reason is because of the C in ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. If Russia fired it at a country immediately over its border on the same continent, it's not really an ICBM. It's actually would be referred to as like an IRBM, an intermediate range ballistic missile, which is really not that big a deal. So the difference is again, symbolic, not tactical or strategic. But the Kremlin still is never going to let a good chance to saber rattle go to waste. And they have said that Moscow will respond harshly to any, quote, reckless Western actions in support of Ukraine. Right, here's the full quote. This is according to Russian spokesman Peskov. Said, quote, the main message is that the reckless decisions and actions of Western countries that produce missiles, supply them to Ukraine, and subsequently participate in strikes on Russian territory cannot remain without a reaction from the Russian side. He continued, quote, the Russian side has clearly demonstrated its capabilities and the contours of further retaliatory actions in the event that our concerns are not taken into account have been quite clearly outlined. Now, what you may think to yourself is, first, that's a lot of word salad. And it's difficult to even discern what exactly he's actually trying to say. And that is actually a core aspect of the point of this. And we're going to break down exactly why he's being so vague and cagey and how we know that this is sort of pretty performative. But first, I want to mention that if you feel like you are backed into a corner by everything you need to get done, you don't need to launch a missile at some civilian city. You may just need a little extra caffeine. That's why you should check out Strike Gum. Listen, guys, this is designed as an energy drink alternative. Not only did, when I was in Afghanistan, I had to drink these energy drinks before going on patrol. It was really, really annoying, right? Energy drinks are loaded with carbonation. They are loaded with sugar. You feel horrible on them. And they're bulky. They're a pain to carry around. So that's why I created Strike Gum. This has all the caffeine of an energy drink, 90 milligrams, no sugar in each single piece. In fact, when we were delivering drones recently to forces in Ukraine, I actually gave them some Strike Gum because I could see that those guys had tons of energy drinks that they would just put down like it was going out of style. And I was like, listen, if you want an alternative, here's an option for you, right? So they seem to really appreciate it. So check us out, strikegum.com, or you can just go to Amazon and search Strike Gum. We're the highest rated energy gum on Amazon. Okay, so let's talk about why the Russians are so vague. So here's the thing, guys. If you want to, let's say you're robbing a bank and you want the bank robbers to think that you have a weapon, right? What's the best way to show them you have a weapon? It's to show the weapon, right? And to clearly state, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to use this, right? Or, to set clear parameters. Everybody get on the ground if you don't want to get shot, right? You would state these things as clearly as possible and clearly delineate the behaviors you want in order to escalate it. Now, let's say you walked in, you wanted them to think you had a gun, but you actually didn't. What would you say? Right? Well, you would have something under your jacket, right? You wouldn't really specify what it was. You might make vague statements about like, nobody needs to get hurt. Don't be a hero, right? You would say vague things that confuse people and make them think, well, maybe he has a gun and he's just being weird, right? So that is sort of the key difference here between credible and non-credible threats, right? In the international community, you want to delineate clearly between credible and non-credible threats, mostly, right? There is an element of vagueness to threats, right? But you want it to be a very tight band with a little bit of wiggle room on either side, right? So the U.S. says, listen, we're not going to give you exactly every scenario in which we would launch a massive nuclear retaliation. But it's right there in the name, retaliation, right? So they say, listen, what we do is say, listen, we reserve the right to defend, Krakow, Poland on NATO's eastern border with the same vigor that we would defend New York City. And that kind of thing, as well as saying, listen, we have this public nuclear response and nuclear response doctrine. It's part of the core thesis, for lack of a better term, of how nuclear deterrence works. You don't want confusion. You want to minimize confusion so that the chance of accidental nuclear launches or accidental escalations are low, but the chances of understanding what will trigger it are high. You want a high level of understanding between the two. It's actually can be mathematically proven in game theory. It's sometimes referred to as throwing the steering wheel out the window. And it's a way to win a game of chicken, which is what nuclear deterrence is. The way to win a game of chicken is to publicly commit as early as possible to an inevitable course of action. So, chicken, right? Two cars driving at each other at a high speed. The first one to swerve loses. So the way to win the game of chicken is to actually unscrew your steering wheel, let your opponent see that you've removed the steering wheel from your car and thrown it out the window. Then your opponent knows that you are absolutely not going to deviate, right? The way to lose a game of chicken is, again, to make vague statements like, I'll never turn. I'm strong and courageous. I don't do these things, right? Do you notice how the theme here is recurrent? And that is the cagier and vaguer and weirder the statement, the less you should give it credibility, right? But there's more. There's evidence that this is Putin posturing. Why? Because before launching this missile, the U.S. got permission, or Russia got permission from the U.S. That's right. Shortly before, this is from Semaphore, shortly before Russia launched the attack, they called the United States and said, we're pre-notifying you before the launch that this is happening, right? And U.S. officials also briefed Ukraine and other allies leading up to the attack about Russia's possible use of the experimental medium-range missile to help them prepare. You might also recall that the U.S. alerted its embassy staff that there would be a substantive aerial attack on Ukraine basically within the day that it happened. And again, this is confirmed by Peskov, right? Peskov himself also said Russia warned the U.S. about 30 minutes before launching the missile. Guys, and here's what should bother you, is that there's a gazillion news outlets producing the salacious, the clickbait story of Russia of this. The hypersonic missile was a warning to reckless West, right? That's pretty alarmist. And then you have to dig to Semaphore, which is a paid, basically commercial intelligence reporting service, to find the part where you understand the truth, which is that the U.S. Russia told the United States they were launching this missile. They literally got permission. So why then is Russia doing this? Well, the message is not for the United States, right? You don't call your opponent and say, I'm going to launch a nuke, right? Yeah, I'm going to make you scared. Like, hey, imagine going to a haunted house and they tell you beforehand, listen, behind the first door is going to be a clown and it's going to scare you really good. And you go, okay, got it. First door, clown, scared really good. Okay, I understand. Right? That's not how haunted houses work. If your goal is to produce fear within the government, you don't tell that opposing government what you're going to do. So then who is the message for? The answer is the message is for you and me. It's for the people that read these articles. Russia knows that the Western free press is a huge strength in the West, and it's also a huge liability because they know that no one's going to report on the fact that Russia called ahead to make sure everybody was cool with it, and everybody's going to report their warning to the reckless West. And so they're playing the media like a fiddle, and they're going to get a bunch of people that read these things, consumers who if you only read this headline, you're going to be alarmed. You're going to think it's a dangerous course of action, and you're not going to be able to place it in context. And that's the goal, right? Putin's realized that the Western governments are hard to subvert, right? They're made up of professionals, experts in this field, and they're well-resourced. But the people who aren't experts, who also get a say in Western government policy, are average voters who consume media over the internet. In fact, the number one source of information for women voters is TikTok in the United States. And for male voters, it's YouTube and Reddit. So this sort of confluence of highly manipulatable media outlets informing voters who then take that information they receive from these sources and use it to cast their votes makes sense. So it makes sense that a lot of voters sat there and said, listen, the media I consume tells me that there's an imminent nuclear danger because Russia is saying, making nuclear threats. Again, notice too, that the word nuclear never appears here, right? Actions, reckless decisions, strikes Russia territory, capabilities, contours, retaliatory actions, right? Our concerns have been quite clearly outlined. The word nuclear, this would warrant a nuclear response, does not appear. And that's pretty telling for someone, again, so think about this whole set of information and understand that this is part of Russia's goal is to scare the West, right? They're trying to rob the bank with no gun. They want you to think they have a gun, but everything indicates, and they've never indicated anything other than we weren't willing to bring our gun to rob this bank, right? Because just like a real bank robber, robbing a bank will get you in trouble. But robbing a bank with a gun will get you in a lot of trouble. Anyway, guys, that's really all I had. Excuse me. Thank you guys to the Colonel Tier members of CombatVetNews.com, like Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, Guyers, Marnie, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karis, L90, and Petra Taru, as well as all of our Lieutenant Tier members. I couldn't do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.